Some nightmares disappear when you wake up. Others wake up with you. Angela Jasmine discovered that terrifying truth when she was 13 years old. It started on a rainy autumn night at her grandmother's old house. While the adults talked downstairs, Angela and her cousins gathered around a dusty spirit board they had found in a closet. They giggled and treated it like a harmless game. They asked foolish questions, laughed nervously when the pointer moved, and finally ended the session without another thought. But something had answered. Something unseen. That night, after everyone went to sleep, Angela awoke unable to move. Moonlight poured through the curtains, and in the doorway stood a figure she had never seen before. It was the shape of a woman, floating several inches above the floor. Long black hair covered most of her face, but Angela could make out pale skin and something wrapped around the figure's neck like a dark ribbon. The room became impossibly cold. Her body was frozen. She couldn't scream. She couldn't even blink. The woman drifted closer. Angela could hear breathing, but it wasn't her own. It sounded wet and raspy. Tears rolled down her cheeks as the figure hovered over the bed. Suddenly, she remembered a prayer her mother had taught her when she was small. Through trembling lips she whispered, "Jesus, help me." Instantly, the figure vanished. Angela sat upright, gasping for air, convinced it had been a nightmare. But the same thing happened again the next week. Then again. Years passed, and the terrifying visitor never stopped coming. Every few nights she would wake up frozen, the room filled with unnatural cold, hearing the breathing and seeing the floating woman inch closer. Each time the prayer drove it away. By the time Angela reached adulthood, she had learned to live with the fear. She buried the secret deep inside herself and told no one. Then, in 2010, everything changed. She reunited with Steve, the boy she had loved as a teenager. He worked at the same hospital where she worked as a CAT scan technician, and their connection reignited immediately. Within months they were married. Steve adored Angela's children, Tyler and Ava, and together they became a happy family. For the first time in years, Angela felt peace. But happiness seemed to awaken something terrible. The nightmares became more frequent. Every night she found herself running through dead woods while a voice whispered, "There's something missing." Every night the woman grew closer. One morning, after another terrifying dream, Angela woke exhausted. Through blurry eyes she saw little Ava standing at the foot of the bed. Smiling weakly, she said, "Good morning, princess." The child remained silent. Slowly, her head lowered beneath the edge of the mattress. Confused, Angela sat up. There was nobody there. Her heart pounded as she searched beneath the bed, but it was empty. Then she hurried upstairs and found Ava asleep in her room. A terrible chill spread through her body. She had seen something. Something pretending to be her daughter. Later that morning, while taking a shower, Angela felt fingers wrap around the back of her head. Human fingers. She screamed and spun around, but nobody stood behind her. Yet she could still feel the pressure of the hand. For the first time in 17 years, Angela wondered if the thing from her nightmares had followed her into the waking world. And somewhere deep inside the darkness, something unseen smiled. Angela tried to convince herself that stress and lack of sleep were causing her strange experiences. But deep inside she knew that explanation was a lie. The feeling of being watched followed her everywhere. Even wrapped beneath layers of blankets, she could feel icy air slithering across her skin as though invisible fingers were brushing against her body. Her temperature burned with fever, but she never stopped shivering. At work, things became worse. As a CAT scan technician, she was expected to remain calm and focused, but lately she found herself sweating, dizzy, and unable to breathe. The ringing in her ears became unbearable. One afternoon, she nearly collapsed beside a patient. Doctors diagnosed her with anxiety and agoraphobia, prescribed medication, and assured her she would recover. But medicine could not explain the whispers she heard in empty rooms or why she constantly felt another presence standing behind her. Gradually, she began withdrawing from everyone. She spent hours sitting alone in dark rooms with the curtains closed. Sometimes Steve would come home and find her staring into nothing. She no longer laughed. She barely smiled. Her children noticed the change. Ava would ask why mommy never wanted to play anymore. Tyler wondered why she became angry over little things. Steve tried to help, but Angela pushed him away. She couldn't explain what she herself didn't understand. Yet every night, around 3 in the morning, she woke to the sound of slow breathing near the bed. Not Steve's breathing. Something else. Something standing beside her. Then came the noises in the house. At first they were subtle. Footsteps in empty hallways. Doors opening by themselves. Shadows moving in the corners of rooms. Angela ignored them, but Steve began noticing strange things too. Objects disappeared and reappeared in impossible places. He would set down his keys only to find them missing. Cabinet doors opened by themselves. Sometimes he heard sounds coming from the playroom late at night after the children had gone to sleep. One evening, while watching television alone downstairs, he heard furniture scraping across the floor above him. He muted the television and listened carefully. The sound continued. Heavy objects dragging across wooden floors. Assuming the children had gotten out of bed, he walked upstairs. The hallway was dark. Tyler and Ava were asleep. The playroom door stood open, but every toy was exactly where it should have been. Confused, Steve headed back downstairs when a deafening explosion struck the outside wall of the house. Boom. It sounded like someone had slammed both fists against the siding. Then another impact shook the room. Boom. Steve grabbed a flashlight and ran outside. The yard was empty. No footprints. No broken branches. No animals. Nothing. Yet he had heard it clearly. As he stood in the darkness, another thought chilled him. Whatever had made those sounds had wanted him to come outside. Shaken, he returned to the bedroom and told Angela what had happened. But instead of comfort, she became angry. She insisted it had been neighborhood kids or his imagination. She refused to believe something was wrong with the house because admitting it meant admitting that her nightmares were real. But later that same night, reality shattered. Angela woke unable to move. The room was darker than usual. The cold was unbearable. Her chest felt crushed beneath an invisible weight. Then she heard breathing inches from her face. Slowly, a shape emerged beside the bed. Long black hair hung over pale skin. The figure floated closer than ever before. For 17 years Angela had never seen its face. Tonight the hair parted. Beneath it was something horrifying. Its skin looked rotten and stretched tightly over sharp bones. Its mouth twisted into a smile filled with blackened teeth, and its eyes glowed bright red like burning coals. The creature leaned forward until its face was inches from hers. Angela could smell decay. She felt pure hatred radiating from the thing. Then it spoke in a voice that sounded like several voices speaking together. "I'm still here." Suddenly the creature laughed. The sound was deep, broken, and horribly wrong. Angela screamed. Steve shot upright beside her. She was thrashing violently and sobbing uncontrollably. "It's her," she cried. "She's real. She's standing right there." Steve held her tightly, trying to calm her, but Angela pointed toward the darkness beside the bed. "Don't you see her?" she screamed. "She has red eyes. She's trying to take me." Although Steve saw nothing, the terror in his wife's face convinced him she wasn't imagining it. Through tears, Angela finally confessed everything. She told him about the nightmares that had haunted her since childhood, about waking up paralyzed, about praying to make the woman disappear, about seeing something that looked like Ava beside the bed, about the hand that touched her in the shower. Steve listened in stunned silence. His wife had been carrying this nightmare alone for 17 years. He wrapped his arms around her and whispered, "I believe you." But neither of them realized that something was listening from the darkness outside their bedroom, something that had finally revealed itself. And now that its secret was known, it was preparing to attack the people Angela loved most. The days that followed brought a brief sense of peace. Determined to fight whatever was tormenting his wife, Steve gathered the family and led them room by room through the house with prayers. Angela held Ava's hand while Tyler stood beside his stepfather, confused but obedient. Together they recited the Lord's Prayer and asked God to protect their home. For a short while something changed. The heavy atmosphere that had settled over the house seemed to lift. The rooms felt warmer. Angela even managed to smile again. She dared to hope that perhaps the nightmare had finally ended. But evil does not surrender so easily. It simply changes targets. 11-year-old Tyler began changing in ways that terrified everyone. Once cheerful and playful, he suddenly became angry and withdrawn. Small frustrations sent him into violent outbursts. He screamed at his sister, slammed doors, and spoke with hatred that didn't sound like him. Sometimes he would stop in the middle of a sentence and stare blankly at nothing. When Angela asked what was wrong, he would simply shrug and say he didn't know. But inside, Tyler felt something terrible happening. Thoughts entered his mind that frightened him. Thoughts that didn't belong to him. He felt impulses he couldn't explain. Dark ideas that made him sick with fear. One morning Angela entered his room and discovered a drawing lying on his desk. The picture froze the blood in her veins. It showed Tyler with wild spiral eyes holding a large knife. Strange dark shapes surrounded him, and the smiling faces he had drawn around himself were crossed out with heavy black lines. "Tyler, what is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. The boy looked at the paper and burst into tears. "I didn't mean to draw it," he whispered. Something told me to. Angela's heart sank. The thing that had haunted her for 17 years was now reaching for her son. That evening Tyler admitted something even worse. He confessed that angry thoughts filled his mind constantly and that sometimes it felt like another person was thinking inside his head. He cried in fear, begging his mother to make it stop. Angela held him tightly while tears streamed down her face. Whatever had entered her life all those years ago was no longer content with tormenting her. It wanted her family. Desperate and out of options, Steve reached out to a co-worker named Eric Morin, a man involved in paranormal investigations and spiritual counseling. After hearing the details, Eric agreed to visit with his colleague Mike, a trained demonologist. The men arrived quietly, carrying bags filled with religious items. After listening to the family's experiences, Eric sat silently for several moments before speaking words that sent a chill through the room. "This sounds like what many call the old hag syndrome," he explained. "But some of the things you've described go far beyond sleep paralysis." Mike remained serious throughout the conversation. Finally, he looked directly at Angela and asked, "Have you ever played with spirit boards? Have you ever experimented with the occult?" Angela shook her head uncertainly, unable to remember anything unusual. Mike nodded thoughtfully and prepared a strange test. He handed each family member a communion wafer. "A human soul is not harmed by sacred things," he explained. "But evil spirits react differently." Steve accepted the wafer without issue. Tyler and Ava did the same. Then it was Angela's turn. The moment the communion touched her tongue, she recoiled violently. Her face twisted in pain. She spat the wafer into her hand and clutched her throat. "It burns," she cried. "It feels like fire." Her eyes filled with terror as though something inside her was fighting to reject it. Mike exchanged a grim glance with Eric. They had seen enough. "It's attached to her," Mike said quietly. "And whatever it isn't leaving willingly." Steve stared in disbelief. "Are you saying she's possessed?" Mike shook his head slowly. "Not completely. But something has attached itself to her spirit. And if we don't confront it, it will continue attacking everyone she loves." Fear settled over the room like a heavy fog. Suddenly Angela remembered something she had buried deep inside her memory. Her grandmother's house. The old spirit board. The strange games she had played with her cousins when she was 13. The age when the nightmares had first begun. Her blood turned cold. Tears filled her eyes. "Oh God," she whispered. "That's when it started." Mike nodded gravely. "Then that's probably when it entered your life." But before anyone could speak further, every light in the house flickered violently. A loud crash echoed upstairs. Ava screamed. Tyler jumped to his feet. Then, from somewhere above them, came the sound of furniture dragging across the floor. Slowly, deliberately, followed by a laugh. Broken. Inhuman. The same laugh Angela had heard in her nightmares for 17 years. The color drained from Mike's face. "It's angry," he whispered. "It knows we're here." And for the first time since entering the house, even the demonologist looked afraid. The laughter from upstairs echoed through the house like something alive, and every person in the room froze. Ava burst into tears and buried her face in Steve's chest while Tyler clutched his mother's arm with trembling hands. Even Mike, who had spent years studying cases involving evil entities, stood motionless for several seconds. Then another crash thundered above them. It sounded as if a heavy cabinet had been thrown across the room. The lights flickered again, and the temperature inside the house dropped so suddenly that everyone could see their breath. Mike turned to Steve immediately. "Get the children out of this house now," he ordered. "Take them to relatives. Do not bring them back until I tell you." Within an hour, Tyler and Ava were gone, and darkness had fallen outside. The house felt dead, silent, waiting. Mike placed candles around the living room while Eric prepared holy water, crucifixes, and prayers. Angela sat trembling in a chair, unable to stop shaking. Steve knelt beside her and held her hand tightly. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. But somewhere inside the house came a slow creaking sound. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Walking above their heads. Yet no one was upstairs. Mike began praying, and almost immediately Angela felt pressure building inside her chest. Her breathing became shallow. The room turned freezing. Eric placed a crucifix in her hand and instructed her to pray with them. But the moment Angela tried to speak, a sharp pain shot through her throat. The words refused to come out. It felt as though invisible fingers were wrapped around her neck. Mike removed a small container containing a first-class relic, said to contain the blood of Saint Agnes. As he placed it against the back of Angela's neck, her entire body jerked violently. A scream exploded from her mouth unlike anything Steve had ever heard. It wasn't merely pain. There was something unnatural hidden beneath it. Angela's head snapped backward. Veins bulged across her neck. Then came the laughter. It twisted. Wrong. It was coming from Angela, but it wasn't her voice. Steve staggered backward in horror. "Angela," he shouted. But she looked at him with eyes full of terror, as though she herself was trapped behind them. Mike raised the crucifix and continued praying louder. Suddenly every candle in the room extinguished at once. Complete darkness swallowed them. Then from somewhere near the ceiling came the sound of breathing. Slow. Wet. Raspy. Steve looked up and nearly screamed. In the darkness above Angela hovered the woman from her nightmares. For the first time he saw her. Long black hair. Rotting flesh stretched tightly across her face. Black teeth protruded from a smile that looked impossibly wide. And those eyes, bright red, burning with hatred. Steve felt his blood turn to ice. The creature slowly lowered itself until its face hovered inches from Angela's head. Mike shouted prayers and threw holy water. The entity shrieked. The sound was deafening, like metal scraping against glass. Angela convulsed violently. "Help me," she cried. "Please don't let it take me." Mike shouted over the noise. "Fight it. Pray." Tears streamed down Angela's face. Every word felt impossible. It was as though something inside her fought against the prayers. "Our Father," she whispered weakly. Instantly the creature screamed. The room shook. Pictures fell from the walls. Glass shattered in the kitchen. "Continue," Mike yelled. Angela sobbed and forced out the next words. "Who art in heaven." The woman with red eyes shrieked again and wrapped its long fingers around Angela's shoulders. Steve watched in horror as dark bruises appeared beneath those invisible hands. But Angela continued, "Deliver us from evil." At those words, the creature let out a scream so terrible that everyone covered their ears. The walls trembled. A wind blasted through the room although every window was closed. The red-eyed woman twisted backward unnaturally, her mouth opening impossibly wide. Then, in a voice filled with rage and hatred, it screamed through Angela, "She belongs to me." Mike raised the relic and shouted, "No. She belongs to God." The creature shrieked one final time. Then everything stopped. The wind vanished. The pressure disappeared. Warmth returned to the room. The candles relit themselves. Angela collapsed into Steve's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. For several moments nobody spoke. Then Angela slowly opened her eyes. The darkness that had haunted them for 17 years was gone. She smiled. A real smile. The first one Steve had seen in years. Later, when Mike asked if she remembered anything, Angela quietly recalled the old spirit board at her grandmother's house. She had been 13 years old. That was when the nightmares began. Mike believed the entity had attached itself to her then, waiting patiently for years. It had attacked when she was happiest, hoping to destroy her marriage, break her spirit, and eventually consume her family. And when it failed to destroy Angela, it had reached for Tyler. In time, peace returned to the house. Tyler became himself again. Ava's laughter returned. The nightmare stopped. But the scars remained. Years later, Angela and Steve would separate, unable to heal completely from everything they had endured. Yet they remained friends and devoted parents. Angela believed the evil was gone forever. Until one winter night, long after everyone else had gone to sleep, she awoke suddenly. The room was silent. Moonlight spilled across the floor. Then she felt it. Cold fingers brushing the back of her head. Angela froze. Slowly, she turned toward the darkness beside her bed. Nothing stood there. But somewhere far away, hidden within the shadows of the room, she heard breathing. Slow. Patient. Waiting. And for just a second, before the darkness swallowed it again, two red eyes opened and smiled.